Welcome to the Brien Foerster Show. It's November the 5th, 2018. My guest today is Brien Foerster. It's a huge honor to have him on the show. He lives in Paracas, Peru, and he's become an authority on the megalithic works of South America and the perplexing ancient elongated headed people of the area. He divides his time between Paracas and Cusco, Peru, and his YouTube channel has over 50 million hits. So look it up, Brien Foerster. It's not spelled like this, Brien. He spells it B-R-I-E-N and Foerster, F-O-E-R-S-T-R. And on his YouTube channel, it states, ancient lost worlds and hidden history, on-location videos made by adventurer Brien Foerster exploring Peru, Bolivia, Egypt, Hawaii, Easter Island, and other exotic places, with special emphasis on evidence that advanced ancient technology and human history are at least 10,000 years old. And study of Inca culture led to his writing of a book called A Brief History of the Incas, which is available on his website, hiddenincatours.com, which is listed below this video. So welcome to the show, Brien. It's a huge honor to have you here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was just thinking all the things we could talk about. I watched so many of your videos, like you reveal all this, advanced ancient technology, and it seems mainstream archaeologists don't want to talk about it or deny it. So I guess my first question is, do you think our ancient history is being suppressed?
I think that has been the tendency in the past, but now it's opening up a lot. We've depended too much on scholars and academics to tell us the truth about humanity. And what I've been seeing are lots of inaccuracies in terms of who made what and when. So that's basically the function of my travels and my YouTube channel, is to expose what's becoming really obvious in that in Peru, there are stone constructions that the Inca civilization could not have made. In Egypt, it's the same thing. I just got back from Easter Island less than a week ago. Same thing. In September, I'll be going to Turkey, and I'm sure it'll be the same thing. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing more and more examples of lost ancient high technology evidence, or it's getting to the point of proof. And academics generally just don't want to address the issue. It's not a question of debating them. They just don't want to come into the arena to discuss. So that's fine.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Why? Like, your videos are so detailed and graphic. You show like routers in stone in Peru, and this stuff, maybe it's like 17,000 years old. Like in your website, you say, over 10,000 years old, but maybe these things are 30,000 years, and there's like electric drilled holes in stone. So it seems pretty obvious to me that's advanced ancient civilization. But so why would, if I was an archaeologist, I think, wouldn't this be great for my career if I could have some astonishing new find that, wow, humans have been here longer than 12,000 years from the Bering Strait, wouldn't this be great for my career? Why wouldn't they want to, reveal this information? Why wouldn't an archaeologist want to do that for their career?
Well, the problem is that there's a paradigm that they generally adopt and agree on. So they agree on a certain timeline, and they agree on who did what. So for example, the Great Pyramid in Egypt, it would have been physically impossible for the dynastic Egyptians to have made it. And when you see the erosion and weathering on the surface, the lack of any hieroglyphs inside, you can definitely see. And of course, I also travel with geologists and also engineers, and none of them will even entertain the idea that the dynastic Egyptians were capable of constructing it. So that's simply one of many, many examples.
Okay, that's good. So they wouldn't even entertain the idea that they could have constructed, whereas these Egyptologists, I think it's unthinkable to them that the pyramids are anything other than tombs, right? I was reading the Barnes Review has a book called The Great Pyramid Hoax, saying that in 1832, some secret society came in and made some inscription inside the pyramid to the effect that, oh, these are tombs for pharaohs, that this was something that they, over a century or two ago, knew was something special, like maybe some kind of electricity power generator. So it seems like maybe they're trying to hide it from the world. I don't know.
Yeah, but actually, that again, it's up to the citizens of the world to expose this stuff. I'm one of many people looking at it, and the more of us that do it, the more that we're exposing the fact that we've been taught lots of lies since we were children about the true nature of humanity and our history.
Yeah, I think you more than almost anyone in the world is really exposing, like over 51 million views on your YouTube channel. Like, I just really admire how you use this technology to get the word out there. So you're one of the main people in the world raising awareness about this, and that's why I just really want to support your career. But I guess I'm interested in the why behind this. Like, and yeah, I understand archaeologists, they have their timeline, and perhaps they have to protect their master's degrees, their PhDs. Like the universities, they would be maybe shunned if they did something different. But there's such a weight of evidence. Do you think this is going to shift? Like, I mean, like I remember one of your great lines in your videos. You said, "Well, if the archaeologists don't want to do the work, then we'll do it for them." Do you think of any professional shift in their thinking with all this evidence coming out?
Well, I don't think there'll be a shift in how they think or what they do, but I think the generations to come will be more open-minded and will look at more of a broad spectrum of evidence. And so that's my hope. And the paradigm is shifting, because I don't really get into debates with academics anymore. I used to, but now they simply ignore the whole topic, which means I think they reached a point where they're actually afraid of the data. So there's no point of them coming up with a theory about how this stuff was done by a Bronze Age civilization, because it simply doesn't work. So they have to either come to terms with it or ignore it to their own peril. I think once again, with the use of the internet, people are looking at many different sources of information, and mainly independent people. So if someone is an independent archaeologist that doesn't depend on a university or a government for their funding, then they can go ahead and present whatever they want to. But it's the ones that are stuck in academia, and again, university/government funding, that are controlled in terms of what they're allowed to say, and their peers will make sure that they stay inside that box. Otherwise, they get fired or treated as heretics. So the paradigm is shifting, and it's becoming more and more rapid as time goes on.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would talk about, say, archaeologists in the United States, Europe, Egypt, other countries, like, say, Asia. Like, if when you say, yeah, universities, I think, are controlled, but it seems to be like global. Like there must be some cabal in place affecting universities generally. Like, I understand that government funding, they might lose their jobs. But if it's global, like archaeologists who work in Africa or Russia, if they're not really talking about, doesn't that show some kind of higher organizational principle? It seems to be above the archaeologists themselves and their universities. Something must be, maybe some cabal holding them in place. Doesn't it seem to indicate that?
I think so. Yeah, of sorts. Again, there's a general paradigm that has been observed, insisting that the Great Pyramid is 4,500 years old, and that Khufu or Cheops was the builder, because they found a statue upside down in a ditch that supposedly has his cartouche on it. I mean, that's the extent of their evidence, which is pretty bad. And the fact that even iron tools didn't appear in Egypt until 800 BC, which is 1,500 years after the Great Pyramid was built. And with bronze tools, you can't cut granite at all. So as time goes on, their theories are simply collapsing because of the lack of data and evidence. And that's all it takes. You don't really need to fight them. You just sort of keep presenting more and more data into the general public sphere, and more people get convinced that that we've been lied to as to how things were done and by whom.
Yeah, I saw your video from Egypt from 2014. You got over 3 million hits, and you're saying, they would probably need something like diamond tools to cut this granite. And how old is this stuff? I'm wondering, like you're talking about the pyramids being some kind of power transformer generation, like electricity generation. This indicates an advanced ancient global civilization, and pyramids are found in other parts of the world. So is that your thesis, that the pyramids had a practical purpose for power generation in an ancient world?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's power, it's energy collection and distribution, but whether that's electricity or sound or vibration. There's a recent video that came out by a guy who runs a YouTube channel called Ancient Architects. And there's a theory that actually the pyramids, of which there are 7 or 8 in Egypt, those are completely different from other pyramidal structures found in other parts of the world, because the construction technique is completely different, far more sophisticated in Egypt, that actually they were weather creators, that they were actually cloud forming mechanisms to produce rain. So that's an interesting theory, but the probable function of the Great Pyramid system was probably multifaceted. They probably did a bunch of different things at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of beyond me. Like, yeah, what form of power? Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. I think in terms of electricity, but like sound. I remember Nikola Tesla said, think of the world in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency, something like that. But
Right.
this indicates to me perhaps a motive, like if the true discovery, the truth of the pyramids could come out, maybe this could lead to free energy for mankind or some advanced energy system. So maybe this cabal doesn't want the masses of 7.6 billion people to have free energy. Like the oil petroleum industry is the biggest industry in the world, like a $220 trillion industry, might put them out of business. So I can see a motive there. You think there's kind of a motive to suppress the truth because maybe it could lead to something like free energy, something really, utopian for the world?
Yeah, I think so. But again, I think their grasp is weakening, and things like alternative energies, beyond the simple stuff we have now, like solar panels and windmills. But to get into something like 0 point energy, it is being heavily worked on. And the good thing is it's being worked on by many different people in many parts of the world. And I think that's the key, is to not have it concentrated in one place. That way, it's very difficult for the so-called powers that be to destroy any kind of new invention, because if it's being invented in different parts of the world with different nuances, there's no way to control that. And if you have little companies producing, for example, a device that could power your house, then that's very different from something like a massive corporation controlling how energy is distributed. So I think that's the way it's going. And it will reach a point where it'll be out of control. And there will be a transformation into more earth-friendly ways of producing energy, but it will take quite a long time, not only simply with people trying to control it, but also just the general acceptance. People don't want to pay extra for electricity or something. So it is coming. It's just, I don't think there'll be a eureka moment when it happens. It'll gradually start to transform. And these ridiculous industries like you were talking about, oil and gas, will have to die out.
Yeah, I guess I have a similar thesis. Maybe I'm concerned that they have a lot of power to suppress things, and may have suppressed things in the past. But it seems perhaps the internet is a great blessing of the last 20 years. Like, so much information is getting out there, like your videos and other videos, and you just quoted another YouTube channel. All over the world, people are adding this information. It's free. So like you're saying, things can pop up in other parts of the world. It's so hard for them to contain and control it. So you're probably right. It's not going to happen overnight, but just gradually, they just can't hold it back, I guess.
Well, definitely. And there's some very simple inventions that have been made. Like anytime you visit Egypt and you go to an Egyptian village, you'll see that there's a pottery storage jar where they pour like pretty gross water into it. But because of the natural filtration system of this type of clay and the way that it's fired, it does a drip feed at the bottom where pure water comes out. That's not an expensive high-tech solution. It's a very simple way to be able to change the polluted water to clean water for millions, if not billions of people.
Wow, I didn't know that. I should just mention for the audience, we have a live audience in the chat. If they want to write any particular questions for you, they can type them in the chat. If I have a chance, I can take a look. Yeah, so for people who haven't watched all your videos, do you want to give some maybe specific evidence? Like I'm thinking of how old I know actually, and I'm a Buddhist teaching Buddhist cosmology. Buddha describes human civilization go back 10 million years. And I know in ufology, they have theories that there was like 5 ancient civilizations. So one was like you mentioned in some of the carvings, serpentine, which was reptilian. And in Buddhism, the Buddha described Nagas, which is a type of deva or angel, which is reptilian and can take on human form. So one theory is there was a whole advanced ancient civilization of these like serpentine creatures. And have you seen evidence of like these carvings I've seen of these kind of reptilians all over the place in these ancient carvings? You want to comment on that?
Oh, sure. No, there are, yeah, representations. Serpents are very important to many different cultures. With the Inca and other Andean cultures of Peru, the serpent represented the subconscious mind, and also the wisdom, like it represents not knowledge but wisdom. And then the puma represents the conscious mind, and the condor represents the superconscious. So when you have those 3 symbols put together, it represents a place of very high learning and a place where the mind becomes whole through the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious interconnecting with one another. So a whole-minded person would be the product of some of the ancient wisdom schools of the Inca and other cultures. We're going to be going to India for the first time in January of 2020, because there is great evidence of megalithic work that there's no way that the known civilizations of Egypt could have possibly constructed. And
You
so
mean
that'll be
India or Egypt?
India.
Oh, India. So ancient, I didn't know about this. Ancient structures in India, like, wow.
Oh yeah, well, that would be very difficult to create today. There are some caves like the Ellora caves and Ayanta caves and Elephanta caves, which are cut into basalt bedrock, and they're just monstrous in size. So they were clearly found by the known Indian civilizations, and then ornamentation was done on the surface, but the actual structures themselves, there's no way that an ancient known culture had done that work.
Wow, I had no idea about this. You know, so much. That's just astonishing. So, yeah. So again, it points to ancient advanced civilizations. So, yeah, you want to comment on the evidence? I studied this, say, from Graham Hancock's work, that approximately like 12,900 years ago, comet fragments hit the north of North America and Europe, and just in one day kind of wiped out an advanced ancient civilization. This is a natural thing, comet fragments, and the evidence for that seems to be almost conclusive. Do you think that was the big time, the break between the past civilization and now?
Yeah, I think so, but I think it was much more complicated than that. They're different people have different theories, but they all talk about basically the exact same timeline, which is the Younger Dryas period of, I just use the term 12,000 years ago. I don't get more specific in terms of time, but we see definite evidence of major cataclysmic damage on the planet. That could be when our planet went from being perfectly vertical to 23.5 degrees. And that could have been impacts from like large comet fragments. But also, if you look up the work of Dr. Robert Schoch, who's a geologist, he talks about bursts of plasma coming from the sun at during the same time period, and that the last ice age ended in the course of weeks, not in the course of 1,000 years, but that there was a major flash melting of a major part of the North Pole, where the ice was more or less vaporized. It didn't melt, it was vaporized, which filled the atmosphere, supersaturated the atmosphere, and then it came down with what we call the biblical flood, which is in more than 200 different cultures of this like massive event. We also have, that's the exact same time when the megafauna of North America disappeared. And then you had the rising of sea level by 300 plus feet, again, in an incredibly short period of time. So that relates to the sinking of so-called Atlantis, and on it goes.
Yeah, this is such a major truth because this advanced human civilization way back there, it's not just our like our cultural history, just think of their science, their art, their music. And like I know kind of off topic, but Edgar Casey was in his trance, he was saying under the left sphinx paw of the sphinx there's this hall of knowledge. Seems to be some evidence that somebody has been digging around down there. And I'm not sure it's one of your videos. So it seems that somebody's gotten their hands on the goodies. Like there's this vast, they might this treasure of knowledge from the past, and somebody's gotten hold of it, and they're robbing sort of humanity of our heritage. Do you think that that's the case?
Well, yeah, there's been a definite cover up. I mean, again, it was Robert Schoch in the 1990s who did ground penetrating radar around the front paws of the Sphinx, and they found this big chamber. And they asked permission to excavate. They were told no. And then they went back home again. And so then the Egyptian government decided to start poking around. And they drilled a number of holes in the frontal area of the Sphinx, but it looks like they missed the chamber on purpose. So they drilled a bunch of holes in the bedrock, and they kept saying, no, it's solid ground. But I think they knew exactly where this chamber is, but they just decided to do this as a mock scientific project to debunk Robert Schoch. But the amazing thing is, in between the front paws of the Sphinx, there are slabs of limestone that clearly were set into place. But then when you go to the left-hand side, or left paw outside, right paw outside, then you see that it's bedrock. So clearly right in between the front paws of the Sphinx, there is a hollow chamber. And so when I asked our guide about that, because there's this wooden planking in between the paws of the Sphinx too, and I noticed that there's a rectangular piece that can be removed. And having been a woodworker, I knew what was going on, and I asked our guide, and he said, yeah, that is the entrance to the underground structures of the Sphinx. And very late at night in the late 1990s, these giant spotlights would be turned on because friends of ours live across the street from the Sphinx, and they said these massive lights would suddenly turn on at 1 o'clock in the morning and then turn off at about 4. So we knew that somebody was doing secret excavations, and most likely it was the Egyptian government.
Wow, like that is so significant. So one theory you're saying is they didn't want to touch it, they left it there, but they made it look like they did to debunk them. And then I'm suspecting maybe they'd actually did get to this Hall of Records, have made this tremendous discovery about our human heritage, and it's held by whoever. Maybe it goes beyond the Egyptian government. You wonder if it affects the whole world. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they found something there and they're not telling us? This is, like you're saying, over 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, well, I'm sure they have found something, but I don't think the Hall of Records is actually a subterranean structure that contained any like tablets or anything. Whoever did this work was way beyond our capability, and I don't think they needed to record information that way. But the other intriguing thing is when we were there in March, near the back side of the Sphinx, there's this metal grate. It's about this big. It's like it's wire mesh with a wooden frame, and it's normally set in place. But the day that we were there, it was actually lying on the ground. So we were able to look inside. We saw that it was hollow, and there's a metal ladder going down. So that tells us that parts of the Sphinx are hollow, or is hollow.
Wow. I saw videos by the Bright Insight YouTube channel by Jimmy, and he's showing at the top of the head of the Sphinx, there's like a hole as well that people could go down and look. I guess you're probably aware of that too, right?
Yeah, and that's been filled with concrete.
Oh, it has.
Oh, yeah.
So there's probably these chambers that go underneath the Sphinx or connect to the pyramids. So this is astonishing. And the Egyptian authorities, what was this archaeologist in Egypt who's sort of running places, and oh, there's nothing there. You look down the hole of the camera, there seems to be caverns going either way, but they tell us there's nothing there, but we'd like to go and see, right?
Oh yeah, no, that's the whole thing, is that they're starting to slip in terms of what they're doing. Like they're making mistakes now, which we discovered. So that's the kind of stuff I expose. For example, when Robert Schoch suggested that the Sphinx was at least 10,000 years old, which is it's about 5,000 years older than the dynastic people. Mark Lehner, who was the chief Egyptologist in more or less in Egypt at the time, he said, show me a potsherd from this culture. And there would not be a potsherd from the culture because they were a high-tech civilization. But what we offer as evidence instead of the fact that at Saqqara, which is pretty close to the Giza Plateau, they found 30,000 to 40,000 turned bowls and plates in very hard stone that had to have been made on lathes. And the only technology we have to do that would be diamond cutting and shaping tools. So they even list, like they have like 50 or 100 on display in the Cairo Museum, and they're even listed as being from the Archaic period, which means pre-dynastic. So that's a mistake they've made, that they're admitting that high-speed lathes able to cut hard stone existed before the invention of the potter's wheel, which makes no sense whatsoever. So that's the stuff I look for, is their mistakes. There's another very simple example, which is outside the front door of the main museum in Cairo. And actually, the good thing now is that they're finishing off the Grand Museum on the Giza Plateau at the cost of $1 billion, which will be open very soon. So it will be the largest museum in the world. The one in Cairo is like this 19th century antiquated thing with stuff in glass cases with dust all over the glass and stuff. But oh yeah, outside the front door, they have two sarcophagi. The one on the right is much smaller, very rough, with hieroglyphics all over it, stating that it's from, I think, the 4th dynasty. So that's Old Kingdom. And then the one to the left of it weighs like 70 tons. The box and lid were made from one piece of stone, no hieroglyphics, and the surfaces are like beautifully flat. And they're stating that that one's older, but the one on the left could only have been made with high technology. The one on the right, you could, pound away with a hard rock and shape. So it's mistakes like that I like to find.
Well, that's really astonishing. And yeah, and also the erosion marks on the Sphinx indicate it's probably at least 10 or 12,000 years old. It's hard to deny that, because when there was heavy rain, thousands of years ago, that's something, of course, they want to say it's like 2,500 or 3,000 years old.
Yeah, no, they can't, because more than 200 geologists have stated emphatically that it's a water erosion. Because it's vertical. If it's horizontal, it's wind and sand. If it's vertical, it has to be water. And so there you have 200 plus geologists saying it has to be much older.
I just want to read something from the chat here. Someone wrote here, let's see, I want to get the quote. Yeah, it says, his name is Jur Zach. He said, the book Forbidden Archaeology tells how there is a highly controlled knowledge filter in place to stop anything discovered, which may contradict the established evolutionary scale. Do you want to comment on that, the book Forbidden Archaeology? Well, yeah, I got that book by Michael Cremo. Yeah. I find that quite astonishing. I read about 300 pages of that.
Oh, yeah. No, Michael Cremo's done a lot. He's been working at this for decades. And he is very correct that there has been this control, but the control is slipping now, as we've been stating, because anybody can go to Egypt and look at this stuff now. If they watch one of my YouTube videos about Egypt, it gives them a guide to as to what to look at, and they can see for themselves that high technology beyond our capability existed. It's not like technology we have, it's beyond our capability.
Well, beyond what we are now. I want to comment from Michael Cremo's work. He says during the gold rush, like in the 1850s, 1860s, they're digging in California, found these stone mortars and pestles in areas of rock and coal about 49 or 50 million years old. And that he's actually seen, and that the University of Berkeley, they hide this from the public, but there was newspaper clippings from the 19th century with photos, and he was allowed to go in and see them. Do you want to comment on human civilization being like that old?
No, I honestly can't, because it's like that's way beyond my ability to conceptualize, and I'm not sure if his data is correct with that. I think that's kind of really excessive time frame. Again, I try to focus on what we call cataclysmic or post-cataclysmic and pre-cataclysmic. There's also a great American physicist called Paul Laviolette, and his theory is that the center of our galaxy is not a black hole, but a pulsar, and that one of these events happens approximately every 13,000 years. So it's happened over and over and over again, where civilization has risen to a high point and then collapsed and had to keep reinventing itself over time.
Wow, yeah, I think you're right. So that's astonishing. You mean they might some pulse from the center of the galaxy could kind of wipe us out?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, basically his theory, what a black hole is it continually absorbs energy and planets and everything, and it just never ends. Whereas a pulsar is something that fills and then has to eject some of that energy out. It's like it fills up and it can't fill more, so it has to release. And so the energy goes across the galactic plane, wreaking havoc as it goes. And I think that's what entered our solar system around 12,000 plus years ago, and just wreaked havoc, caused us to have to go back to what we call the Stone Age period. And then civilization suddenly reappears in places like Samaria, the Indus Valley, and Egypt, say 6,000 years ago.
Well, you're giving me lots of food for thought of the audience. We're learning a lot from this, because I have a bit of knowledge here and there, but you've filled out so much. Just get back to Michael Cremo. He was saying they found human, anatomically modern human skeletons in coal deposits in Illinois and Colorado going back 300 million years. This indicates maybe several phases of civilization, and the idea that stone structures last a long period of time with things like concrete and automobiles, they can weather away within a few thousand years. But I guess, yeah, like you're saying, you don't know about that, right? That's a bit extreme.
Well, it's too extreme for me to think about. But we can tell through, again, we have a great geologist who's a Canadian, Susan Moore, who comes with us on almost every tour. Like, she comes to Egypt with us every time. She's going to India with us because she's been before. She's been to Peru. And I'm constantly asking her in the field about how, the weathering of surfaces, depending on the material, but how long she thinks ago the cutting and shaping was done. One relatively new bit of information is we went to Petra in Jordan with her, and just as we were entering, I was, it's all supposed to be sandstone, which isn't that hard a material, but when we looked a little carefully and tried to scratch the surface and stuff, she said it's 7 out of 10 in terms of hardness, with diamond being 7, or with diamond being 10. And she said this is more like a quartzite. And again, to cut quartzite, you need basically diamond technology. And Petra is not what most people think it is. Most people have watched the Indiana Jones film that features it for 2 minutes, and you see this narrow passageway. Then you see what's called the treasury, which is this flat carved surface. And in fact, Petra's 12 kilometers long.
Holy smokes. I've seen videos on Petra. It's an amazing, huge stone structure. You wonder, how could they possibly have carved that, and how old is it? But I didn't know it's 12 kilometers long.
Oh, yeah. No, my wife and I walked all the way to the end of it. And it took us hours. And then we had to ride horses back because we were exhausted. The final part of it was a staircase that was something like 2,000 or 3,000 steps. And then also chambers 300,000 cubic feet in size.
So how old is it? You can't measure rock, right? How old do you think it is?
I think it's pre-cataclysmic. So I think it's 12,000 plus years old. And the treasury is the only aspect of it that was like very finely finished, because you see real detail work. I think that was done by the Greeks probably 2,000 years ago. But the rest of it is just flat, simple surfaces with these massive chambers. It shows heavy amounts of erosion. We're going back in April in order to look at it again, because one trip to one of these places is not enough. You look at the big picture, but then your mind starts asking questions. So you have to go back and start looking at more of the detail as to what you may have missed.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this pulsar star you mentioned. In the Buddhist teachings, and I think in Hinduism too, he describes vast ages of human civilization where things peak out, sort of morally advanced, spiritually advanced, and then it goes into a decay over periods like tens or hundreds of thousands of years. Things completely bottom out into chaos and corruption and violence, and then things get together again, and it peaks out again. Periods of great virtue. I don't think he said particularly advanced ancient civilizations. He describes previous ages of great kings and stuff. But there's that undulating wave idea of history that goes up and down. And that's definitely in the Buddhist and Hindu teachings going back like millions of years. So I guess that's kind of maybe consistent with this idea of, this pulsar star every 13,000 years or so. I mean, I'm just sort of trying to connect the dots, because I'm a Buddhist teacher and trying to connect it to your archaeology work.
Sure, no, but that does make sense. That civilizations either technically rise to a higher level or spiritually, or maybe both, depending where. And then there is a crash, whether it's due to external forces or the rise of immorality or a combination of the two. So I think that's a definite, it's a definite case that we've had these cycles going on for a very extended period of time. And it's good to look into the oral traditions and mythology of ancient cultures, because I think they're all based on fact in some way. I mean, they tend to embellish like way too much over time, but I think the foundation of all of this stuff is in historical fact.
Yeah, you want to comment and say the ancient Sumerian tablets or the ancient Hindu teachings on the Vimanas and things like that? That seems to be a record of some real ancient history, like the Sumerian tablets. And do you think a lot of people would say like 30,000 years is sort of a rough figure for some of these old carvings? And what about I've seen a lot of videos on the Bosnian pyramids in Indonesia, pyramids in China. I was in China myself almost 3 years ago. I was in Guiyang, and I was saying to my friends, hey, that looks like a pyramid. And I was filming it, It seems, and the Chinese government doesn't really want to discuss it. So I've read there's like 1,000 pyramids all over the world, and maybe some type of electricity grid or ley lines or some purpose for power generation. You want to comment on that?
Sure. Well, I think there could very well be like a grid network, utilizing Earth's natural energy in order to enhance, like focus and enhance that energy for higher levels of consciousness, or I think in the case of the Egypt ones, for enhancing energy or harnessing energy for utilization in some kind. I think actually that's what the ancient architect recent video was about, and caught on to that. It looks like the obelisks in Egypt were part of this energy system too. It's like the pyramids were the receivers or were the collectors, and then the obelisks were the receiving station. So it's almost like a Wi-Fi energy system of some kind, because if you go to Karnak and see the scale model, which is quite good, of what Karnak originally looked like before it was destroyed by different civilizations, you'll see that the obelisks are perfectly set up in a grid pattern. It's not like they're randomly placed, here, there, and wherever. It's like they're in a line, and that to me represents, specific locations for receiving energy.
Wow, I didn't think about that, because I know, I think of the obelisk, say in Washington D.C., and on the dollar bill they have the pyramid. You wonder, do they know something? Is this sort of a veiled message? Do you think there's any connection there, or they knew something and they value it?
Well, I think since the beginning of history, there's always been a group that has controlled knowledge. You can name all sorts of institutions like that, and you do have the symbolism in like Washington, D.C. was designed by a very high-ranking Mason. The whole city is laid out in terms of sacred geometry. So there's also, I actually did a Masonic sacred geometry tour of Washington, D.C. about 4 years ago. It was absolutely fascinating. For example, there's nowhere you can go in Washington, D.C. where you can't see the obelisk. The obelisk is right in the epicenter. And there are all sorts of other factors, like certain streets are named after solstices and equinoxes, and sacred numbers are used in the number of stairs going up to certain things. So that place is definitely based on sacred geometry. And yeah, you could go back in time through the control of knowledge by the Catholic Church, and before that by ancient Rome, and before that Greece, and before that the mystery schools of ancient Egypt. So there always has been a group controlling this spigot of knowledge, but I think that whole thing's falling apart now. It's just, they can't hold it together. It's impossible. There are too many people questioning what's going on. So
wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing that about Washington. Yeah, I'd read that the Masons had designed it. It was
oh yeah,
very Masonic. Yeah, so I guess perhaps this is the big issue is getting this information out, into the real mainstream, because right now we're on the fringe, right? You're on the fringe and giving this to humanity. So that seems to be a big issue, is breaking through this control system. But yeah, like you're saying, these control systems have probably been there like for thousands of years. Cabal's controlling humanity because knowledge is power, so they want to keep the knowledge for themselves.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. And yes, any advice on how to break through this control system, or you think it's just a matter of time? I guess people are waking up and knowledge is pouring, like you've been saying, it's probably a gradual process.
Oh yeah, but it's speeding up really fast. There are fewer and fewer people watching mainstream media because they don't actually cover the news, and people are picking up on that. So they're watching like all sorts of different people who are actually in the field filming and presenting what's actually going on, as compared to the filter. Like the filter is disappearing because mainstream media is losing their viewership, and by losing their viewership, they're losing their people financing them. So independent research is what is taking over now. I watch lots of different channels on YouTube of people who are very credible and who have big viewership. So I think that is the future. It's just general people becoming the so-called journalists and showing the truth of what has been going on, what is going on. And so there's great hope in terms of that kind of thing.
Yeah, mainstream media is losing its credibility, so people are just going elsewhere,
Oh yeah.
You want to tell us a bit about your website, Hidden Ink and Tours, and the tours that you lead, and how people can support you and join you, and a bit more about what you're doing and how people can get involved with you?
Sure. Well, the most powerful medium I have now is YouTube by far. I've written 35 books. I'm working on number 36 right now, and they're all on my website, hiddeninkandtours.com. And 95% of actually 98% of the content is free. The only thing that I do in terms of paid stuff are the books. And also I have Amazon Prime channel now, which has like 1 hour videos, so much more extensive than the little ones. As I said, I just came back from Easter Island, so I'll be putting together at least a 1 hour video of things that don't make sense on Easter Island in terms of structures made of stone that the Polynesians could not have made, plain and simple. Because you see the Polynesian stuff, and then you see stuff that had to have required some kind of relative high technology. So yeah, almost everything on there is free. We have 3 tours of Peru for next year, one in June, one in August, and one in November, and they're filling up quite fast. Then we're doing Egypt in April. That one sold out 2 months ago.
Mhm.
So we're doing another one in March of 2020. And then right after the Egypt one, we're going to Lebanon and Jordan again to look at Petra and Baalbek. Also, I'm going to, we have a tour in February in Mexico because there's signs of lost ancient high technology in Mexico that could not have been achieved by the Aztec, Maya, or Olmec civilizations. And yeah, that's pretty well it. But yeah, the website has a huge amount of content thanks to my very clever webmasters. And as I said, almost all of it's there for free. And what I try to do is to present most of what I do to the general public at no charge, because it is their heritage that they're looking at. It's, you know, global human heritage. So yeah, that's basically the story.
That's generous of you. Yeah, it's like our heritage, and yeah, YouTube is by far the most powerful tool, I'd say, for a lot of people, because it not only reaches millions of people, but it multiplies into the future. Like 100 years from now, people will be watching your videos, or centuries from now, or millions of years from now on another planet. They can look back to the 21st century. Oh, this Brien Foerster guy, look what he discovered, and now we all know about it. So yeah, it's a powerful tool, YouTube, and it's good that we do like live streams like this. I guess,
definitely.
yeah, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of people, they don't seem to appreciate it or don't get it. But yeah, so it's great that you're using this technology. And I watch your live streams. It comes up, Brien Foerster live now. So yeah, I guess I want to ask you, so what are some of your most astonishing discoveries? I mean, how many years have you been at this? I mean, there's so many things you could quote. Do you want to say maybe the top 3 or some of the most astonishing things you've ever come across?
Yeah, I've been at it. I've been curious about this stuff since I was a kid, but and I went to the first major megalithic site I saw was Stonehenge when I was 16. At that time, there was no fence around it. You could just walk up to it. Now it's like controlled like a military base. But if I had to list the top 3, Petra was one, because usually I do lots of research before I go to a place, but in the case of Petra, I didn't bother. And so it was good because I was completely blown away at the scale of the place, and the nonsensical story I was told by our guide that it was done by some nomadic Arabs 2,000 years ago. It's like, no, that doesn't work.
Nomadic Arabs chopping away for 12 miles of rock.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. But he kept insisting that's how it was done. It's like, no, it doesn't work. Well, I'm still discovering places in Peru. There are some small places that we're discovering over the course of time, thanks to local knowledge. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many. I like to, again, any place that's curious requires usually numerous trips, because you can't take the whole thing in. So I've been to Machu Picchu, I've been to 69 times, and there's still some aspect of mystery there. Yeah, there's another site called Oriente Tambo, which is a megalithic site in the Sacred Valley of Peru. I've been there probably 100 times, and it's it has nuances and subtleties that I'm still picking up on. In terms of other parts of the world, Ethiopia has some fascinating so-called chapels carved in the bedrock, which are not explainable in terms of conventional thought. So we're hoping to go there in 2020, and Turkey in September. And as time goes on, we're just doing more and more. It's not a full-time thing as much as it was, but my wife and I are still very active in terms of doing all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the elongated skulls, like in Peru, you specialize that. I've seen your videos on that. It's just astonishing. I mean, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is alien. I mean, it's like another species of humanity with a larger skull than us. Or we got to talk about those, and what do you think they are?
Well, we did recently. Actually, that's where I am right now, is in Paracas, where the elongated skulls lived, and Again, it's a subject that academics don't want to look at because there's so many inconsistencies as compared to other native people in Peru. But what we found out is that they are a subspecies of human that were able to breed with humans. Their DNA seems to come from the Black Sea and Caspian Sea and Crimea area, which is halfway around the world. That's based on DNA studies. They appear to have had very light skin, dark red hair, and probably green or blue eyes. So they don't fit in with the standard people crossing the Bering Land Bridge. And they appear to have shown up about 3,000 years ago and disappeared 2,000 years ago. So also, yeah, the morphology of the skull, I've had many different medical personnel look at them, and they can't figure out what it is they're looking at. There are too many differences to make them any kind of disease altering the skull. So clearly these were a people originally born with elongated skulls that migrated to the coast of Peru from somewhere else in the world. And what I'm suspecting is the Black Sea and Caspian Sea area.
Wow. That is just astonishing. I mean, a lot of ideas are going in my head. I was thinking, was this pre-cataclysm like 12,000 years ago? But no, you're saying like 3,000 years ago. Was this? Yeah, and like I was thinking with the cataclysm, some survived and like maybe got to go Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. We talked about that as 11,500 years old. But these elongated skulls, if they came from Europe, the Middle East, the Black Sea 3,000 years ago, I mean, it's just astonishing. And was their brain capacity bigger than our brains? Like, were they more intelligent?
Well, their brain capacity in some cases was 25 to 30% larger than ours. So, and the brain did fill the cavity. So it's not like there was an air gap or something. Also, the shape, with the elongation shape, it means the organization of the brain may have been quite different from what ours is. They had no form of technology whatsoever, but they were very advanced in terms of their agricultural and textile skills, like on a very extreme level, especially taking into account that this part of the world gets 1/4 to 1/2 inch of rain a year. So being able to farm in a productive way meant they had to access underground streams and rivers that actually come from the Andes. So they were also responsible for most of what we call the Nazca lines and geoglyphs. So hundreds of years before the Nazca existed, the Paracas people were creating hundreds, if not more than 1,000, of these geoglyphs and lines that you can only see from the air. So yeah, the mystery of them still keeps going, and I plan to do more DNA testing as time goes on.
Wow, that just gives me lots of theories. Like, what if they're more spiritually advanced? Like, they didn't need much technology with that brain capacity. And I think there's definitely evidence that brain size is reflective of intelligence. Like, larger brains means more intelligence. There's been studies for 100 years on that. So, were they perhaps more spiritually advanced, intuitive, and they did this farming? I know, like, maybe I don't want to get into conjecture and theory so much, but I like to do that on the Brien Foerster Show. And any more theories you just want to, or any conjecture about them?
Well, because technically they were like a Bronze Age, Stone Age people. They were able to build very big pyramidal structures out of adobe clay. There's still some in the area that exist that would have taken hundreds, if not thousands, of people to build. So they were a very spiritually oriented people. No sign of tools that were specifically made as weapons. So they seem to have been a very peaceful culture. And my theory is that they were exterminated actually by the Nazca. The Nazca seem to have come from the north during a time of increasing drought and entered the Paracas territory, and I think exterminated the royal class, who were the ones that had the elongated skulls, because everything goes downhill from that point on. The textiles become rougher, the ceramics become cruder, their ability to produce food dwindles to the point where the Nazca actually had to abandon the area about 600 AD. So yeah, that's the Paracas are my favorite culture because of all of these inconsistencies And as far as I can tell, no academics have been studying these people since about the 1960s, which is very odd, you know, since they were such a strange subspecies of human, with all, you know, with red hair and light colored skin, and they were like 6 foot to 6'2" tall, which is very tall for a Peruvian. I'm very proud and blessed to be able to study them because nobody else is. Yeah, so that's an ongoing process.
Wow. Well, I can kind of understand academia avoiding that because it might lead to something like UFOs, ufology, aliens. Who knows? Like when you say subspecies, it looks like a higher human species, and you're saying they were like the ruling class. Or you're saying there was ordinary human beings and they were the ruling class, and then they got evaded, they would be executed. You know, to take over.
Yeah, well, it was only the chiefly and spiritual class who had elongated skulls. Everybody else was normal looking. So the greater population of the Paracas were indigenous people of the area, but the Paracas nobility were completely different.
So they must have been higher intelligence if they're the nobility. And holy smokes, that is just astonishing. So it doesn't surprise me that they wouldn't be touching this since the night they discover something like that as let's not touch that. It's going to change our whole understanding of human history. You know, it's too big.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And so that's why I'm exposing it mainly through YouTube, just so that other people in the world and Peruvians can have a look at it.
Wow. And what about the elongated skulls in ancient Egypt? There seems to be carvings of that, the big skull in Egypt. Do you think there's a connection there?
Well, there are lots of carvings of them. That was during the time of Akhenaten. So I wrote a whole book about him because he's such an interesting character. But so far, I haven't seen an actually elongated skull in Egypt. It may very well be because they're being hidden from the public because they don't fit in with the standard story of who the dynastic people were. But that's why we go back to Egypt once a year. And in future, it may very well be twice a year in order to get access to maybe private collections that have this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's be my assumption as well, that they found them and hid them. I was reading that in the 18th century in Peru, they discovered these elongated skulls. So maybe they just couldn't hide it. It was sort of out of the way, and somehow it got out, so they couldn't suppress it in Peru. So we're blessed to have that. But you can see how they're ignoring it. If they could indicate like a more intelligent human species, that's astonishing to human history, that's such a thing. And you wonder, what else are they hiding? What else is out there in our history?
Oh, a lot. There's a lot that they're hiding.
Wow. Maybe I should save that for another episode. I'd love to have you back on the show whenever you have time. Like, it's a real honor. You're coming up on almost an hour now. But yeah, is there anything else you would like to add? I mean, you got so much knowledge, things I couldn't think to ask of that you come up with, like you're talking about ancient India advanced carvings there. Anything else?
Well, actually, yeah, I'd love to come back, say in 6 months, and we can discuss some more stuff if you want.
Yeah, let's do that. It's been great having you on, Brien. This has been an excellent episode. I just want to thank you, and people can find your website at hiddenincatours.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on the show, Brien.
My pleasure, Brien. Thank you.
Okay.
These videos are dependent upon listeners' support, so please donate at the link below. Please like and subscribe. You can copy these videos wherever you like.